Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Sensible Hippie Podcast, and I'm your host, the Sensible Hippie. A few months ago, we had an amazing guest, Gary Wayne, and he took us down the Genesis 6 conspiracy rabbit hole. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. But oh my God, I want to thank you guys so much. We've gotten so many views on that episode. As of right now, we're almost at 10,000 downloads, 10,000 views on just that episode. And so many requested Gary to come back. So, joining us once again today, we have Gary Wayne, the insightful author of the Genesis 6 conspiracy. So get ready for another deep dive into the Genesis 6 conspiracy rabbit hole as we dive into Mount Hermon, the Nephilim, 7 sciences, and the mark of the beast. So strap in for an episode that promises to be enlightening as it is enthralling. So I just want to give you a little heads up that there is a technical hiccup during this episode. So my volume is a bit low, but the good news is you can hear Gary Wayne perfectly and clearly. And let's welcome Gary Wayne to the Sensible Hippie Podcast. Okay, so your book is coming out soon.
Yep.
Paperback.
Yes, on paperback, and it's at the printers. It's being assembled, and so I'm hoping to get delivery of books in the next couple of weeks so that I can fill all of the pre-orders. And I know they're on at least another run coming in behind for the pre-orders that are coming in off of Amazon and other places. So getting excited as it gets closer, and the Kindle edition is now available for pre-order as well. And I'm hoping to get a link up to my website here pretty quick so that people have the option to click over there to pre-order for a digital copy if that's what they're looking for. And so getting closer, getting very excited. There's a cover change on my website. It's got the old cover. I'm trying to get that updated as well to the new cover to differentiate it from book 1. And in the meantime, I'm promoting the book hard and started book 3.
I didn't know you were going to start. I didn't even know book 3 was coming. That's news to me.
Well, I had started it before book 2 that I ended up publishing, but I was working on it for 3 years, and it just wasn't working. It wasn't coming, and so I was struggling. I kept putting more and more stuff into it, but I didn't like the look, the feel, the layout. And so what happened is all the contact with the audience on shows, answering questions, emails, social media, is that there's this hunger. I thought I felt strongly coming from the Christian community that book 1 is really, really good from a global perspective, and it's got a lot of good Christian stuff in there as well. But nobody has ever written a book specifically targeted at Christians in a complete way as to everything that's in the Bible, and connect everything from angels, demons, giants, from prehistory to post-Diluvian history, Israel, and the end times. So I decided to do that book, and then I realized I wanted to do a different sort of format than the first book, because in this book, and even though I have a lot of footnotes in book 1 or endnotes, I don't put a lot of information in there. You just get the sourcing, you get some information, but this type of research and book has a lot of information in the footnotes, and so I moved them from endnotes to the same page, and so you can see the footnote number, look down on the same page, and if there's additional information, whether it's etymology or the meanings of the words, or more on what I mentioned in the sentence in terms of a quote or a paragraph, it's going to be there as well, so people can peruse into that. And so as I refined book 2, I realized this is why I couldn't write book 2 before, the one that's now going to be book 3. And so it seemed like if I had listened sooner and paid attention and done what my customers were asking and what I was seemingly being led to do, then it would show me how to do and why I was struggling in making book 3 now as it'll turn out, written in a manner that made sense to me and how I wanted to present it. So, guys, everything's a process in this, right? I mean, everybody's on a quest, and there's always more research, and it's a matter of what do you want to do with that information. But if you decide you want to do something with that information, it's got to be sort of, I think, presented to your customer base in a way that they want to receive it. And so that's what I learned there, and now I'm doing quite well on the book, and I'm not gonna hurry it because it's a big topic as well, but it's comes out of the giants and prehistory and goes into end time prophecy as well. But this time it's about the Holy Covenant and the build up to the Holy Covenant, the curses and the blessings of the covenant, and Second Exodus and the end time.
Oh, that's awesome! That's exciting. You
Yeah.
need to make a movie.
Well, I talked to a lot of people, but it's easy to say these are good concepts, right? But to try and, the cost of doing these types of productions is high, and you have to have, the producers who are going to put up the money, and then you have to have people who are going to show it. So a lot of them all of the sort of contacts that I've made, they sort of die on the grapevine. And I don't know whether it's just that the people who are in power don't want all of the information out there, and in a way that you just can't sort of dismiss it. So, and that may be the case. So I don't know, but the more it goes, I mean, Nephilim. It used to be that nobody talked about giants and Nephilim or Rephaim and demons, and in a large manner or a recognized, okay, there's a lot of research and information on this, or in a connected manner. And now it seemingly is almost coming of age where there's something to this thing about Nephilim. So both Christians and non-Christians are, looking into it deeply. And I think Christians are probably been the most reticent ones to to get going on it. And I think it's starting to turn the corner that this is part of the pieces of the puzzle that they've been missing, and it starts to answer a lot more questions for them.
Yeah, I say. Yep. So I really enjoyed our last conversation. I mean, we went down a lot of rabbit holes, and I'm hoping to do that today too, which I'm sure we will, because you are just full of information. But I was really intrigued and want to know a little bit more about Mount Hermon.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, the significance and the lore around the Nephilim and demonic entities and the location, and now it's a UN is located there, isn't it?
Yeah, they have the largest contingent and largest base for the UN located at Mount Hermon. And it's quite secretive. They say it's because it's a strategic place and it would allow them to deliver services and things like that. And they created the latitudes and longitudes in the 1600s. They placed the 33rd parallel to go through Mount Hermon. I don't find that to be a coincidence. But Mount Hermon is a story that needs to be taught in a lot more detail. And in book 2, I do cover that off, and I also have documents on Mount Hermon, and it sort of goes in a few different directions. But it is like the epicenter of this whole understanding of who's ruling the world, and why and how they came about ruling the world, and that this mountain is going to become more important as we move into the end time as well. And so it makes sense then, if it has something to do with the universal religion, the universal government, that the UN would have their fingers involved in it, because even their logo represents this prehistory with the laurel wreath and their latitude and longitude that they have on it, and the flat earth kind of model that they've presented in that logo. And that's the laurel wreath, which is the wreath of the gods, the crown of the gods that they wore, and the crown that the kings wore. And they also awarded to the Olympic heroes for winning the contest back then. So it is something that I think is going to surprise people as we move forward. So Mount Hermon is the place where the 200 in the book of Enoch swore their oath of Herem anathema to carry it out to the end. And Herem anathema is regardless of the consequences, and they're doing something knowingly that's illegal, and they don't care what the consequences are, but they're going to do this, and they're going to create the giants that they're going to use to usurp control of the religions and the governments and the whole elite of the world, and they're going to subjugate humankind based on that. This is the root with the oath that they took of Herem anathema to the legal-based oath system of the world, both before and after the flood. Mount Hermon is the Hebrew word Hermonim, and it's related to the Hebrew word harem and harem. See, not all of those words start with CH, but they're pronounced as an H sound, and that means a curse or accursed, and words like that. And so, but it's also understood as being possibly holy as well, because Hebrew words have several meanings, so you have to sort of pick the right meaning for it. But you get this consistency that this has been named accordingly because it is the accursed mountain where the oath was taken, the oath to destroy humankind. And so I walk through all of that in book 2 as I get into the deeper aspects of Mount Hermon. And so Mount Hermon is also known by different names. Even in the Bible, it has 4 different names. So Sirion is one, and Sion is another one, Sion. And it's not the same Zion. It's a different Hebrew word. And it's the French alliteration for Zion that they've substituted in to almost make a confusing translation in the King James Version Bible when it has Sion in there. So that's in Deuteronomy 4:45 where you'll find the name Sion. So it sort of brings into things like the Priory of Sion. And if you're doing a counterfeit of everything, you're going to need a counterfeit mountain. So you have the Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and you have this Mount Sion that now has sort of the roots to the universal Babylonian type of religion that is coming, or the Enochian mysticism, as I like to call it, that's coming for the end time. And so Mount Hermon is a place where the council of the gods are located. And that's the Baalim as it comes up in the Bible. So in the Ugaritic text, the Baalim are on Mount Saphon. That's another transliteration for Mount Hermon. It's equivalent to Nippur in Sumeria, where the assembly of the gods was located. So this is probably the most holy occultic site in the world. And the Council of Gods ruled from there. So Baal after the flood, El before the flood. And so you have parent gods ruling before the flood, offspring gods ruling after the flood, who create the same crimes, which is how the Rephaim show up after the flood. And just as in the Ugaritic text, they created the Rephaim. They're also doing fertility rituals for those Baalim to come back to create more giants, because they have a fertility issue after the flood versus before the flood. And so this assembly also has the assembly of the Datanu, or Datanu, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And that is the demigod council of the Rephaim. And they have all these different names. Datanu is the same tribe of the tribe of Danu, or the Tuatha Danu, or the Tuatha De Danann, and a whole bunch of other names for the Tuatha De Danann. And that's that council. That's the Indo-Aryan Council of Giants that are ruling with the authority of the Baalim at Mount Hermon. And these are the visible ones on the earth who have the authority that they received from the Divine Council to rule and reproduce everything on earth in a manner that the gods want to have done. So you have that as a connection between the antediluvian epoch and the post-diluvian epoch, and the council that Satan sits above today as the prince and the god of this world, ruling over the 70 nations. both before and after the flood that Deuteronomy 32 talks about. So 70 sons of Adam, the 70 patriarchs listed in the Table of Nations in Genesis 10 and First Chronicles, and the same number of the sons attributed to being born to Jacob while in Egypt. And that's kind of a dual prophecy because it's talking about something for Jacob that's still yet to be fulfilled. And you have a prophecy for the time, and this is the time of Moses being the prophet, and you have important information from prehistory. And so, and I'll explain why you have different translations in there where it will say some will be the sons of Israel, some say is the sons of God, and other ones just say angels. And all of them are in part correct if you look at Israel as being a compounded word from Sarah and El. And now you get a translation for it that, and you can do it a couple different ways, but the one that might be the most appreciated is the sons of the ruling God, or the reigning God, or the mighty God. And so these are angels. And it's just, and that's the title that is going to be passed on to Jacob to change his name to Israel, which is why you have the linkage in there with the sons. So it starts to open up that this is a far-reaching piece of information for the time, out of prehistory, and what's going to happen in the end time. And this is the mountain that has the gateway to Hades, the cave at the bottom that Baal would go through every day to inspect his realm, both on earth and in Hades or Sheol, which is their heaven, and where they exert their power through the spirituous ones who rule, and all of their offspring want to join them in once their bodies die. That's where they want to go for heaven, and that's why you have these rituals in the occult, not for the humans because our spirits sleep, but they have disembodied counterfeit spirits that are not permitted into heaven and not permitted to go to sleep. So they're trying to find their way into Hades. And you have the Pan Temple there as well. You know, a satyr god, as we would understand Pan in the Bible. And you also have the Rephaim in the Ugaritic texts who went back and forth between Hades, as did Baal. And that they would do this at certain times of the year, and particularly after they, you know, if they had made their way to Hades with the rituals, that they could come back through these portals, just as the same way you would have the cave in Mount Hermon as a portal. And this is the location on the Golan Heights, which is right below Mount Hermon, where Gilgal Rephaim is located. Wheel of the Giants, Wheel of the Spirits, and there's like 100 domens or portals in Gilgal Rephaim. And, you know, 7496 is the word for, is shed, for the Hebrew word for spirits. And no, shed's a different word. This is for evil spirits. Anyways, it's Rapha is the word. And it's part of the same meaning as 7497 for giants, because they're associated, and it goes back to 7495, which means to heal. And one of the names that you might see in the Bible or as an angel in the book of Enoch is Raphael, and that means healer of God. So it's rooted in 7495, and El being the God. Well, these angels, particularly the fallen ones for sure, had multiple names, multiple titles. And so you have Baal, who has several names, and one of them is like Raphael. And in the Old Hebrew, the word Rephaim would be RPM, no vowels. And so his would have been RPL, Raphael, without the vowels. And so it's spelled with an I-E-L in a couple different ways in the occult. But it's really, as we would understand it in more modern Hebrew, as Raphael, but spelt a little bit differently with and understood differently. And he's thought to be the patriarch with that title for the Rephaim after the tribe. So he creates these tribes of Rephaim who take their name from an eponymous basis. So Yeah, you have all of this going on, and Mount Hermon is thought to be the location for Armageddon. And Dr. Heiser talked a little bit about that. And I'll take this way beyond what I've heard Dr. Heiser talked about. And he's right on that. And I'll show how he got there in the ancient Hebrew with the silencing of the G and the difficulty and the translating in and out of the Greek into English from making it work from a Hebrew perspective. And so it means Mount of Assembly. And Megiddo is the word that is used for the assembly of God in Isaiah 14. And it has the IN in there, and that's the Mount of the Assembly. So when you get into the book of Daniel and they're talking about the end time and the assembling the mountains, it's going to be rooted in those words Megiddo, because that's going to become the mountain of the assembly. And people think that Megiddo is, where Armageddon is going to be found, because they used a hard G because they didn't have the proper lettering in Greek to do it. And I'll show examples of other words done that way, like Gomorrah, for example, in the Old Testament. And you'll also see it spelled as Amorah or Hamorah. And it was more of a Hamorah. It's got that sort of deep. And so again, you see it's the same thing going on in Armageddon, which is why John instructs us that we want to understand it from a Hebrew understanding. And so this is the mountain of the assembly. In Megiddo, where it's located, as most Christian theologians place it, there's no mountain. So how could it be Har, mountain of Megiddo? It's the mountain of the assembly. And so there is a Megiddo below Mount Hermon, and it's a city. So you can apply all of the allegorical meanings to Megiddo and that assembly and what happened there, and apply it sort of dually over to the location. It makes sense that Antichrist is going to move to the mountain of assembly, to the mountain of his council of gods, who have given him full authority as Antichrist to make his last stand with his fallen angels, right? It all sorts to come together, and there's a heck of a lot more information I provide on it than that, but it starts to give you meaning, and which is kind of the point of the book, is not only to talk about angels and demons and giants, but how does that affect and help us understand end time prophecy. So I go through a lot of that in book 2 as well. So yeah, Mount Hermon's a big topic, and it's a fascinating topic, and I think we need to learn more about it.
Wow. What is this 7495? What is that?
Oh, so if you pick up a KJV Bible, and you want to know how what word is used, let's say for Rapha or Rephaim or Gibborim, it's all written originally in Hebrew. So what Strong's did was create a concordance. He has dictionaries, and he has concordance. He also has encyclopedia as well, and all from the 1850s. So I have a digital one that has the original Strong's dictionary, because I want the full meaning. I don't want the politically correct edited ones or the shortened ones. I want to know the full meaning. I want to know what they originally wrote when they created that dictionary. And so if I go to a verse, any verse in the Bible, I'll have what has been inserted by translators as words in black, and then all the words that come directly from Hebrew are in blue. And if I click on that, I go right to the meaning. So I can understand right then and there, is that word translated properly, and what words were inserted in terms of how the translators wanted to kind of make it, make sense in terms of the translation. And sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't. They get it right more often than not, but there are some peculiar translations, of the word and the inserted words, just to say it lightly, and people will see that sort of demonstrated in book 2. And it's not that I think the KJV is a badly translated Bible. It's just doesn't translate the full meaning of words, and it has some dubious translations, whether it's an error or there's something else going on there. And other translations have issues as well. And nothing in there is going to change anything about your faith. But there are some words in there, let's say like unicorn, which should not be in there. And the unicorn is on the coat of arms of the Stuart dynasty, and noting King James is the sponsor. King James Stuart is sponsor of the King James Version Bible. That word unicorn is the Hebrew word rem, and it means a wild bull. It has nothing to do with a horse with a horn and a mythical creature. But it's very important to the Stuart taciturn imagery of their genealogies back to giants and to their patriarchal celestial godfather. And he's the mighty Prince James, as he's called, which is a very interesting term if you consider that mighty ones comes from Gibor and Gibborim. That he's claiming, and prince is the old term for a king. It was a royale, and so royale means kings of God. And he had the divine right of authority from, guess what, Mount Hermon, and a specific god that he worshiped to, right? So all these things are important, and doesn't mean the KJV is a bad translation. It's just we need to be, as Christians, a little bit more thorough on things, I think, just to make sure we're not easily sort of deceived. So, yeah, it's a great thing to have, and you have to be careful though, because if you're going to the Hebrew words, because they have multiple meanings. Some of them quite diverse and quite opposite. So it has to fit. If you're going to take a different translation as to what the translator did, you have to follow the rules. And my rules is it has to make sense within the sentence that it's in. Can't change what else is written in the sentence or be at odds at it, or within the verse that it's in, or within the chapter that it's in, or within the Bible, where if you do a change and it contradicts anything else in the Bible, that's the wrong translation, because the Bible does not contradict itself. So if you do that, it starts to make some sense. And when you're applying it well, you have things light up, like all of these connections of the mountain of assembly, which is also a different Hebrew word than is used for the assembly of the council of gods in Psalm 82, because it's not God's holy assembly.
Wow. In your translations, I mean, it is very important. So I have a question then about Jesus dying on the cross. Mm-hmm. Did he die on the cross, or was it a stake?
Well, you could translate it either or. So that's when you have to look at the other words associated with it, and everything goes to a cross, as opposed to just a stake, like being impaled. But the word, just like in Greek, or just like in Hebrew, Greek words can have multiple meanings as well. So if you were to do a stake, then where you're having his hands nailed to the cross, that would be in contradiction, because there would be no crossbar. So, but when you look at all of the words and you take it back, it all goes to a crossbar meaning. So, and there's a few different words that are used for the cross as well. So if you look at it in whole, and people I have a document on it, I'll send that to you, just so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think even when some translations said when Jesus was dying and he was talking to the prisoner that was beside him, he said something about, yes, you will be with me in paradise, but the comma is in a different place.
Yeah, well, comma is the translator insertion. So for whatever they're trying to do with the meaning, that's their editorial or commentary, so to speak.
I see. So when he was saying that you'll be with me today or something, I don't have the scripture in front of me, in paradise, did he mean on earth paradise? Did he mean on heaven?
He'll mean in heaven, but the question gets to be is how in heaven? So does that mean that he would be like Enoch in heaven or Elijah in heaven? Well, of course, his body would have died, and it's going to be the spirit part that's in heaven. But he may not be walking around in heaven. He's probably sleeping in heaven. And because we're told when we die, we sleep. And there's three components to who we are. One is a body, one is a soul. That's the oiketerion, and it's a dwelling place for the spirit that comes from heaven. So just as Ecclesiastic tells us that when we die, your spirit goes back to heaven, and you get hundreds of passages that tell us that we sleep when we die, just as Jesus spoke of Lazarus as sleeping, even though he was dead. Your spirit goes back to heaven. This is not soul sleep. This is the spirit. The soul is the word that the wisdom of this world and the rulers of this world use. They do not want to recognize the spirit that goes back to heaven. So they say that it is soul sleep, and it's the soul and the body that stay here and kind of decays. But it's not the necessary part. It's the physical world. So when we're resurrected, we're going to receive a new body, a new oiketerion, and it's going to be in the same kind of body that Jesus had, that was something new that could go back between heaven and earth, and was a resurrected body, and we're going to receive bodies like his. And so with the resurrection, he created something new in my understanding of it, and that'll be a new oiketerion for the spirit. So we get that word oiketerion out of Jude 1:6 and 1 Corinthians 5:2. In Jude 1:6, it's the habitation where those fallen angels who sinned left, and they need an oiketerion on earth if they're going to create giants, because they have to have a physical form and they have to pass on DNA to do that. And so that's what they created on earth to commit the giants commit the crimes of creating giants. And so that soul and the body that they created, the spirit merges with the soul, and it's of this world, and that's why the occult only talks of this world. The other passage is 2 Corinthians 5:2, and it's house in heaven. So a dwelling place, again, in heaven, just as there's a dwelling place for our spirit on the earth, which is our body, why our bodies ache to be going to our true home. So it's perfection and all the multiple layers of allegory that it utilizes, and you get that full meaning coming out of the full meaning of the word for Greek, because you'd have no idea that habitation means a dwelling place for a spirit.
Right. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Can you elaborate on how the legends of Nephilims have influenced maybe cultures and religions around the world?
Well, sure. So we understand biblically that there are evil spirits. And we also understand that there's different levels of gods that are kind of worship that we get biblically. And so there's, in Hebrew, when it's talking about these different kinds of spirits, you have some interesting passages that helps us in this kind of understanding. So you have like devil demons that are talked about in the time of Jesus, and these are unclean spirits, and this is the Greek word daemon. And that's important to understand because that's the root word for demon. And so we get an understanding with Legion and all the other ones that there are a number of passages that are talking about these demon spirits. But you also have these devil gods that are sort of worshipped in the Old Testament as well. And that goes either back to Satyr, or you have an application where you have it as for Sheds, the other word for evil spirit or disembodied spirit that are being worshipped. And so the demigods are these lower level of spirit, just as they're talked about biblically and outside the Bible, as you look at all of the words associated with them, that they are a lower level of God. And so you have demigods that are being worshipped. And that's the second type of God that Israel is told not to worship. And if we look at what happens in, let's say, the Greek culture, you have hero worship. And what would happen is the ruler of the city, after he died, and he didn't want to die, becomes very upset. And he's a spirit, and he would come back and haunt the place that he ruled. And the people have to do sacrifices and everything to ward him off. And then as things sort of rolled forward downstream, you have the divine representatives of the gods, the royals, claiming themselves to be gods, and as a demigod through their bloodline. So, yeah, it's interesting that we have this parallel ruling mythos all around the world, but when you look at it in detail, it is actually talking about the same different splits. And one example of that might be in the Quran, you have the jinn. And jinn is the root for genie, and it's a spirit, right? And Satan is called in the Quran Iblis, and he's a jinn. But then there's a lower group that are talked about as jinn as well, but they're not angels. They're not the fallen angels. They're a lower group of spirit. So this is a constant that is talked about around the world.
That is interesting. Antichrist and the seven science.
Yep.
What is the seven science?
Oh, the seven sciences. Yeah. Okay. So it's one of those things that we take for granted because we live in a sea of polytheism. Like we're like an island in this abyss of polytheism. And this is the basis of polytheism, is the seven sacred sciences. So how the Gnostics and the secret societies frame it in their history is that Adam was taught a lot of knowledge while in Eden. And if you think about it, he would be taught knowledge. I mean, he's interacting with God. He's got a facility to run from the Nile to the Euphrates, which included Mount Hermon. And he has all of these different types of orchards. He has all of these different types of grains that are being produced. He has all of these different types of animals that are domesticated. And this is a huge territory. And so, Eve is created to help him, but, it's still this incredibly large area, and it's all the garden. So it was all garden-like at that time. There's 4 huge rivers running through it, including the Nile and the Euphrates and 2 other ones. And so what the Gnostics say is that God taught him all the knowledge he needed to run this. And so he included astronomy and whatever else he would have to have and more to run this facility. So when he left, he taught this knowledge to Cain and Abel, and then later to Seth. And so obviously Abel is killed, Cain is ostracized, and he takes this knowledge he learned from Adam and he starts to utilize it, and he builds a city. So it would include masonry, which is the 5th science, or geometry. That's the city in Nod. And there's already people there, but that's a different rabbit hole. And he builds it, and he names it after his son Enoch. And so Enoch learns all of these sciences from Cain, but he develops them in a significant way and then puts them into 7 different attributes. So you're going to have like astronomy, you're going to have music, you're going to have arithmetic, you're going to have rhetoric, you're going to have grammar, dialectics, and the 7 liberal sciences as we understand it today. And then, of course, the branch sciences as well. And so it's put into 7 sciences and then developed. And then it's realized that between that knowledge and the knowledge that they're going to receive from the angels, that they're going to keep this information from the mundane, the ones who don't deserve it, in this case, the Sethites, right? And this is going to be the sciences that is turned into a ritualistic way with sun worship and all the other things that go along with polytheism, and the development into the mystical religions that has degrees like education does in universities, which in the old system, the third degree gets you first level of adepthood. And there's a lot of degrees to come after that. It's the equivalent to splitting the third degree into 11 ways to create the 33 degrees of the Scottish Rite, which is came about in the last couple hundred years. And so out of the mysticism comes the religion that I call the beast religion, that's going to work in harmony with the giants when they're created in Genesis 6. And it's going to be the governance run by the demigods who have received their authority from the gods. They're also the head of this religion, and I call it a beast religion. And this is the religion that crosses the flood and begins at Babel, which is the root word for Babylon, and the universal religion, the mystical, the mystery religion as it's called, Mysterion, and it's an initiatory knowledge cult that's coming in the end time. And so it's important to understand what these 7 sciences are. And out of that comes the mystery schools. Notice the word mystery again. It's ruled by mysticism. Science, as we understand it today, is even though people say it's objective, it's no religion, it's all the strings are pulled by the polytheists. And that's why you see everything that they do honors their gods, including the buildings, naming things after them. It embraces their genealogies, their history, but it's designed to lead people away from God. And it's also designed not to give God credit for anything, which is why you can't have God entered into anything into the sciences, and to slander God. And it does all of those 4 things. And so the 7 sacred sciences create the mystery schools. And just as in the universities, they have initiatory societies, whether it's alpha, beta, skull of bones, whatever different level, that's where the secret societies get their birth from. And so they take their history right back to those 7 sacred sciences, development of those sciences amongst the elite, and then different societies and secret societies that will pick, in the modern version at least, of the secret societies, they have a specific science that they develop. So Freemasonry develops masonry or geometry. Rosicrucians are more into the alchemical side, and probably, I guess you would probably put arithmetic with that, as it starts to split off into, the arithmetic gets into chemistry and trigonometry and all that other sort of stuff. So
wow, it's all connected. Everything connects right back to the Nephilims and Mount Hermon, and it's like a big circle.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Well,
yeah.
that's and we're told this, and we're told it in a couple of ways. First is that in Ecclesiastics it says nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again. So what happened before the flood and shortly after the flood continues to try and happen. The difference between before the flood and after the flood is the Antichrist hasn't been permitted yet. So one presumes there was an Antichrist or a leader of giants before the flood that was a big part of the wars and leading them into the apocalypse. And then the second thing that we're taught as Christians is from Jesus, is that the end time and the chronology of events that he provides in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21, it's going to be like the days of Noah. And Noah lived 600 years before the flood and 350 years after the flood. And it's the giants that were the suppliers of the violence or the wars that is talked about in the flood story. And the giant narrative comes as a preamble into the flood story as the cause. And that they use this knowledge that we're just catching up to destroy or corrupt the whole earth. And that's the Hebrew word shakath. And that means pervert, ruin, decay, destroy, all things that they're doing. So when it says the whole earth is corrupt, that also means the DNA of animals and humans, and the plant genomes. And ability, obviously, in that to manipulate DNA and things like that. Things we're just catching up to today. And so we should start to see more parallels. And just as you had the fallen angels providing illicit knowledge that ramped that knowledge up quickly, particularly with the rise of the giants from that time forward, we see knowledge being ramped up to, in our society, at an incredible rate right now that will mirror what happened before the flood. The difference is we won't have a flood this time, and Jesus prepares us for that in Luke's version. Not only does he call it like the days of Lot, but also days of Lot and Noah. So Lot was part of the Sodom and Gomorrah narrative, why that's in there, and that destruction. And that's going to be what the destruction would be like by fire and brimstone in the end time. Unless Jesus steps in, all flesh would be destroyed. And that is the ultimate goal of the fallen angels, is to have their offspring try and destroy the earth, justify their own rebellion, and initially to try and ensure humankind would not be raised to be up like angels, and then to judge those angels for those human crimes. So when you look at the analogy that you get out of Shiva being put into CERN, and the connection in the pantheon as being the same title and meaning of Abaddon and Apollyon as destroyer, the doctrine of Shiva is that to recreate a new earth or renew the earth, you have to destroy it first. That's why they're the destroyer god. And just as the phoenix comes up out of the ashes, this world that is being destroyed won't be replaced for a world for humans. It will be for their spurious offspring. And Oikatarians would be supplied to those disembodied spirits in that new earth. And the rebellion, ultimately, in their game plan, would be a sustained treaty and a justification for it. And the earth would be the realm of the fallen angels and their spurious offspring forever, just as they're trying to do in that movie Doctor Strange against the evil Lord of the universe, right? They want the earth as that treaty where they can rule. And of course, it's all about fallen gods or fallen angels and mystical religions and wizards. And you couldn't have a closer analogy to what the reality is from their perspective as to what they're trying to bring about. So they want this rendezvous with destiny. And the birth pangs that come that are described in Jesus's signs as part of the overarching signs, as the days of Noah or the fig tree generation, is you have the sorrows. These are contrived catastrophes that they're bringing on to destroy the world, because that's what they want.
Yeah, I think your title of the first book was How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind.
Yep.
Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's done in terms that they want to just rule over us, right? So, but the net result is that enslavement will allow them to ensure that we never become like gods or like fallen angels. And that promise is reserved for the spurious offspring. And so the deception that you can make the analogy to is what the message is to Adam and Eve is if you want to be like God, you surely won't die. Well, you have to eat from this tree of evil. Well, you have to have immortality, and you have to have unlimited knowledge to be sort of God-like. But once they ate from that tree of good and evil, they didn't have access to the tree of life. God foresaw all this, and the plan incorporated all the free choice that's going to happen. So it's playing out as to how it happens. But humankind, if we're not part of the resurrection, we're not going to be part of eternity. And so they would even look at, after the resurrection, if they could win their own place and they could have humans following us, they could use us as slaves or rituals, but we would never become like them, and we would die. And that's ultimately would be the best case scenario under that type of regime. But obviously the resurrection changed everything because they didn't anticipate it. They just wanted humankind wiped from the face of the earth, to be remembered no more and not to reach our destiny. Plan B after the resurrection is what we had talked about just a couple of minutes ago. So if there is room for us, which I think probably not, but that's where it would be for, is to be sacrifices to the gods and the demigods and for slavery. But they could create, with their knowledge, probably some other lower form of beings to do some of the things that they wanted, unless they can't provide something more than just the soul and the body, which is the issue, is the spirit. So that may be their limitation on that.
And this taking on the mark of the beast, what is this mark of the beast? Is it something physical, something spiritual?
Yeah,
A literal mark?
It's a literal mark. It's
Is
just,
it? Ooh.
yeah, and so it's going to be a literal marking that has technology that comes with it, angelic technology. Okay. And so it's going to be on the hand or the forehead, and it's likely to be some sort of implant that can be seen under certain conditions, whether, whatever the technology is going to be. But it's angelic technology, so that means AI. That means quantum computing, interdimensional, digital, crypto. All of these sciences that are currently being developed will be merging into that. And so it's designed as that literal mark to control everything that you do. It will blockchain everything, just as they're trying to create that technology now. And it's part of the technology that's being developed for it, so that they can see everything you do. And you get a social score, just as Alibaba's system is working for the Chinese. And this is the same type of blockchain system they want in place for all the passports and things that they'll merge eventually into this mark. It'll have the ability to give you better health. And in Davos in 2017 or 18, they said this medical chip plant that will cure diseases, give you longer life, some sort of long life, as in a counterfeit of immortality. People will demand it because of the things that they're going to bring on, the diseases and pestilences and things like that. And the delivery system will be the healthcare system. And so this is an implant as they see it, and it's got this technology that they talked about at this last meeting, that in 10 years, when this is fully developed, that they're talking about now, you'll be able to communicate with each other telepathically. You're creating the hive mind, right? And it'll be interdimensional to get knowledge. And that knowledge is the divine essence, as the new age movement would call it. It goes back to Eastern religions and to Gnosticism through Sophia. And I'll make the connection so that people better understand where I'm going to go now, back to Sophia. And understanding Sophia means wisdom, and philosophy, which is the theology of the seven sciences and the arbitrator of it, that means the love of Sophia. Is the theology that's in the religion that people say there's no religion in it, but it's completely polytheistic. And Sophia was the mother goddess who supplied all wisdom and created the 12 archons that God is said to be part of, as well as Satan. So that's how they establish him as being an equal, Satan as an equal to God, and the God of the Bible went rogue. So back to the divine essence, that's the equivalent in Hinduism and Buddhism as the Brahman, or as you might better understand as the Atman particle, ATMAN or ATMA. And I cover all of this in the new book as well, and show people the sources and places and how you get there with it. And so the Atman particle is what they're searching for at CERN. And what do you have going on at CERN other than Shiva? They're searching for something called a God particle that they say, well, no, it's not really a God particle, it's this. But they're actually looking for something that is the God particle. And AI and quantum computing goes interdimensionally, so they can search for whatever they're looking for in different dimensions. And the Atman lives in all dimensions, and it is an invisible particle as opposed to one that could be measured as they do in quantum mechanics. So they're looking for this invisible particle because what it does is it merges with a particle that you can measure. And the Atman is said to hold all the knowledge in all the universes. And the Atman is able, through quantum entanglement and the merging of with visible or measurable particles, and it's going on in unlimited numbers all of the time, is able to send all of that knowledge through all dimensions or universes instantaneously. And that's what they're trying to create with the quantum, to get access to this knowledge or make a portal into another dimension to supply that. And then they're going to provide that chip system for your immortality or some form of it, and probably replacement parts and clone bodies from you down the road that is being developed. But that's not for humans because our spirits sleep. But if you are a counterfeit spirit, if that body dies, you'll have another body that you can go in as your Oiketerian. So it's for them. It's not for us again. But the promise is to make you gods in exchange for receiving this mark, and that you'll have to have an oath of loyalty sworn with that as well, to be loyal and to fight against the evil God and his angels and the evil Christians and monotheists like the Jewish people, and wipe them from the face of the earth. And so this Atman is part of the Brahmin and is a female construct as the divine essence. And it is the Veda's version of the Holy Spirit, just as Sophia, as a mother, creator God, and supplier of wisdom, attributes of life from the Holy Spirit and the knowledge that the Holy Spirit provides. It's a counterfeit of that. Sophia is the Western counterfeit mother goddess, and a mother goddess is representative of the Holy Spirit in the occult, so at whatever levels of that. So along with the violations against creation, because it's going to change your DNA and all sorts of other things as well, but you're receiving the spirit of the Atman or other demons into you, and it's a counterfeiting of all aspects of the Holy Spirit, which is the only sin that's not forgiven, as the book of Matthew talks about. And that's why the people who take the mark of the beast, they'll go to the lake of fire, but they will not receive the second death. They will burn for eternity as punishment, along with the demons and along with the fallen angels. So the mark of the beast is still developing. We're going to see versions of it that aren't that threshold of crossing over that's at the midpoint of the last year, but it is the technology that's going to be advanced. So we'll see lower forms that aren't as, let's say, eternity consequential beforehand, but I would be advising against any of that technology that is entering into where it's eventually going to go. And another thing that's really rather interesting is that we're told that as Christians that we'll be saved from the time of wrath, which is typically the seventh year, the year of the Lord's wrath. And I cover this off in detail. And these are the wrath bowls that are covered and poured out throughout the year that leads to Armageddon. So the mark of the beast happens at the midpoint. So we should be ready for tribulation. We won't be here for the wrath, but there's also a time of trial, an hour of temptation, Revelation 3:10. And that is the Greek word hora. And this hour is a marker. So not only are we going to be saved from the time of trial, that I think that implies the mark of the beast. but the mark of the beast is at the midpoint. So we're going to be here at least to the midpoint. I think a little bit longer too. And where I get that from is that's the same word that is used in Revelation 16 for the hour that the 10 kings with like mind or a hive mind hand their power over to Antichrist to overthrow Babylon and set up his new religion. And then they introduced the mark of the beast. And he rules for 3.5 years. So the mark comes very early on after the destruction of Babylon. Babylon is said to be destroyed in Revelation 14 in the summary of the last 3.5 year events at the one of, and before the mark of the beast. And you get the exact chronology of the major events in Revelation 14, 7 or 8 through to the end, including the Armageddon war. And it's destroyed in an hour. And that's the same hour that's talked about in Revelation 17, and the same hour that we're going to be saved from temptation or trial, as you take that back to Greek. It's also the same hour that is described in Revelation 18 with the destruction of Babylon being destroyed in an hour. So we have a timing there for this. And so we'll see. The point of the matter is we're going to see technologies that will look like the mark of a beast, but it's like the birth sorrows. It gets stronger as it goes, and then there's that point of no return. But we're going to be saved from that mark, and that's the hour that Jesus is talking about in his chronologies, the hour that he's coming back. It's the same word. It's the same marker.
How long is an hour?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a short period of time. It could be considered, an exact hour. It could be understood as a day. It could be understood as a season, or up to 3 months. So we don't know exactly how long that is, but there's a period of time when these events are unfolding in the days of the seventh trumpet, which overflow into just past the midpoint of the last 7 years. And this is when the mystery of God is all fulfilled, and it's at the last trumpet. So you just start to see everything sort of come together once you start to put passages together, but put it together in a way that is centered around what Jesus said, and including Revelation, because it's the testimony of Jesus Christ that the angel presents to John in a vision. So it has to fit. So when he provides the chronology, just let it fit. Don't put what Jesus said around other prophecies. Put all prophecies around what Jesus said. All your conflicts and contradictions go away.
Interesting. So shortly after the mark of the beast, it'll be the end time coming?
Well, the end time is technically the last 7 years.
Okay. So this is going to happen before the mark of the beast, before the 7 years?
No.
And then the 7 years?
No. And then the last 7 years that are mentioned in Daniel 9:27, in the time of the end, which is in 9:26, that's the Hebrew word ket, meaning end time or last time. And you have a midpoint, you have 2 halves of that 7 years, which is the abomination, right? And that's where the crowning happens at the midpoint as well. And why Jesus points us to Daniel for the timing of when he's putting the abomination, and again, how we know there's a chronology that's in place along with some other things as well. And so the last 7 years has 3.5 years and 3.5 years on either side of the abomination. And so there's a period of tribulation. And in Revelation 2:8 to 10, you have 10 days of tribulation. That's the Greek word thlipsis, and it means tribulation, affliction, trouble, things like that. And it's the same word that's used in Matthew 24:21 for the great tribulation that happens after the abomination. And it's also the same word that is used for the revelation of the saints in Revelation, or the tribulation of the saints in Revelation 7, who are told who the tribulation saints, or not, I'm sorry, the first fruit saints that are told in Revelation 6 to wait for the tribulation saints to be martyred like they were for the testimony of Jesus. And so you have this tribulation of the saints that happens in the first 3.5 years, and another great tribulation not seen since the end of the world, starting after the abomination. You get a word in Matthew 24, 7-8 called there'll be a time of great affliction. And then you get people testifying against each other and turning people in a time of death and killing for the testimony of Jesus. And that's the Greek word thlipsis, the same word used for tribulation. Probably should have been translated as tribulation, or the other ones as tribulation as affliction. And so this is matching up with Revelation 7, and the chronology fits. And, you have the final preaching of the gospel before the abomination. And in Revelation 14, before you get that summary that I talked about, you get the angel preaching the last of the gospel there. And the two witnesses for the first 3.5 years preach the gospel. The 144,000 will teach the gospel, and they're seen in heaven as first fruits, so martyred like those ones in Revelation 6 and the saints, all pointing to a midpoint. So when we look at Matthew 24:21, that it says tribulation, we have a parallel verse in Mark 13:19 that's talking about this time of trouble not seen since the time of creation. And the word is affliction there, not tribulation. And of course, it goes back to the same Greek word thlipsis. So it's the exact same verse, almost word for word, Matthew 21, Mark 13:19, and they flip-flop the translation. It's the same word, tribulation. So there's two tribulations. One that's for the second half, one for the first half, one for the saints, one for the whole world that's not seen. And it's the cognate word for trouble coming out of Hebrew, which is the Hebrew word tzara, starting with a T. So it's a tsara or tzara, as I just sort of blend it together. And we see that in Matthew, not in Matthew, in Daniel 12. This is the time of trouble when Michael stands at the midpoint of the last 7 years. That word trouble is tzara. And this is when you see a special resurrection, not for the church, but for Israel and Judah, some to everlasting life, some to judgment. This is Ezekiel 37, the dry bones that are being raised. And as you get into the teens, you get the second Exodus that happens in the last 3.5 years, and the reconciliation of Israel and Judah, which happens in the Great Tribulation, in the time of trouble, that's talked about in Daniel 12. Jeremiah 37 talks about this as the time of Jacob's trouble, that Jacob will be saved out of, and then it goes into the second Exodus. That's going to be led by Jehovah, Jesus, and King David. And King David and Jehovah are also mentioned in Ezekiel 37 in the second Exodus. And so this is the time of trouble that they'll be saved out of. And this all will happen before the wrath bowls, the year of the Lord's wrath, in the year of the Lord's favor, when Jehovah will be the breaker that is going to lead Israel in the second Exodus along with their King David. And it is the time, as Micah 5 talks about, in the time of the Assyrian, the time of the Antichrist, when he invades their land. So again, second half, 3.5 years. And there will be 7 shepherds and 8 principled men raised up as part of the leadership of this great second Exodus. So yes, there will be tribulation that we're going to go through, but we won't go through the wrath, which is thumos and orge in Greek, and then there's 4 or 5 words that are used in Hebrew for it, but they all match up perfectly on the timing. But we need to prepare for tribulation before the last 7 years, during the rise of Babylon, and in the first 3.5 years. Pray for a pre-trib rapture, prepare for tribulation, just as the New Testament tells us that we're going to go through tribulation. And so it's important, again, as we understand what happened in prehistory with Israel and the prophecies that are identified for them, we need to apply to them and keep that separate from New Testament prophecies for the church. But Israel will accept Jesus as their Messiah as part of the reconciliation. They will be made into one stick, and they will be part of the bride, as they're talked about prophetically in the Old Testament as well, and in time for the supper of the Lamb.
Interesting. So, do you go to church?
Probably not as often as I should.
I'm sure what you probably, when you listen to them, not that you want to point out things that are
Yeah.
wrong, but you must see that.
I do.
Yeah.
I try and put things into perspective. I know that they don't know about prehistory and prophecy, and they're not taught that, and they're told not to teach it, and that they teach good values. But when they're talking about things in prehistory, they sanitize it, they change it, they rationalize things. They teach a good message on principles. The thing that I think that people want more of is they want the whole context of the Bible, so they can have a better understanding why these are what we need to be. This is why we're Christians, and what our destiny is, and why we need to do these things that we're being requested to do.
Exactly. Why do you think they're told not to tell us these things?
I think
it's going to frighten us.
I think it's in preparation for the end time. I think the seminary schools, both from the Roman Catholic Church to Protestantism, they've all been infiltrated, and that and the ministers tell me they're not allowed to teach on this stuff. They're not taught it, and I think they want people prepared to be easily deceived because they counterfeit everything, and then they're going to create a universal religion, which means they're going to bring Christianity into it as well, but in a polytheist form. And they're going to use the Bible against us because our shepherds haven't properly prepared us. And so it's important, whether people agree 100% with the things I say or right, the underlying point to it is learn and learn more and do it quickly and try and help others, because we're seeing things speed up. And I do think we're in the fig tree generation. And so this is going to really be speeding up. I don't know when the last 7 years start. I know we're not in it. I know the seals haven't been opened yet. And I do believe that we're in the sorrows. And so expect stronger pestilences, expect more wars and rumors of war. Look how the earthquakes are increasing. Look at the sea, as Luke talks about, surging more. And there's going to be famine that comes out of this. And that's just going to get stronger. And those are all the same catastrophes that are in the seals, trumpets, and wrath bowls. They just come in larger doses as we get closer to the seals, and then 25% destruction in the seals, 33% in the trumpets, and then everything would be destroyed with the wrath bowls, except Jesus steps in to stop that.
So the first seal, when that opens, what is that? Is it a signs that we'll know? How do you know we're in the first seal?
Well, I think we're going to know we're very close to the first seal is when we start to see the false prophets and the universal religion really coming into play. And again, in book 2, I cover this off so that people get a real good feel for why that timing coincides. You need the Babylon in place because, in Revelation 6, you have this ephah of these scales and balances. Well, it's Babylon that's going to control it. And that's the ephah in the book of Zechariah that is being set in place.
What's ephah?
Well, it can mean several things. One is the scales.
Oh, okay.
Right? Okay. And Babylon is the universal religion that makes the way for the 10 kings to be the 7th empire that hands 3.5 years later their empire over to Antichrist. So we need to see that universal religion and the false prophets rise. And it's not that the white horse is Antichrist writing on it. I mean, he's negotiating the covenant that starts the last 7 years. If you want to know for a timetable of the last 7, as soon as he's part of that group that is negotiating this covenant, the covenant of death, as Isaiah 27 and 8 talk about. And I cover that off and how you know that's the same and connected into New Testament prophecy as well, particularly Revelation 12, that covenant that's going to be annulled, covenant with death. Anyways, he is the one that launches that last 7 years and then begins his rise to Antichrist. So he's not necessarily the one that's riding the horse, the white horse that starts it off in the seals. I mean, this is a set of events that are coming about, and I think it's related, but I think we have to understand that that bow is not a bow and arrow. And the bow is actually means, as you take that back to Greek, a simple cloth. And it's more like akin to the white robes that the gods of Greece would wear or the kings would wear. And the crown is a laurel crown, as you take that back to Greek. And it's, the crown that we talked about earlier that the Greek gods wore and that the
UN flag?
The King's War, yeah, same one on the UN flag. It's the same type of imagery, and it comes from the laurel tree, also important in Greek history. So we'll see that coming together, and ultimately, and we don't know how far into the first 3.5 years that this great war of destruction that happens, that people are hiding in caves thinking it's the day of the Lord, but it's implying there's a large war there, but there's 2 other larger wars coming. So that's how we know we're going to be in that zone. But if you see Babylon in power, we may not yet be in the last 7 years, but we are very close. And I think that tribulation of 10 years is the ascent of Babylon to power. I think Babylon essentially is in power at the beginning of the last 7 years. She's the one that's going to rule over the 10 kings who grow jealous of her. So that just seems to all come together for the opening of the seals to be in place.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and another reason why they should be in place is you have the 144,000 going out to awaken lost Israel and to preach the gospel, I think, as part of that first 3.5 years. And the 2 witnesses will be preaching against the system as well, which implies that the Babylon system is in place before the Antichrist, or the Leviathan system, as the occult calls it. So they look at 2 systems of the end time, the Babylon system and then the Leviathan system, and how they get there biblically is the beast that comes out of the sea with the 7th empire has multiple heads. That's a Leviathan that comes out of the sea with multiple heads. And it's, the authority comes from Satan for the beast empires, and just as it will again for this one. So that's the transition from the old system to the new system, or the preparatory system to the ultimate mark of the beast system.
Where can people find you at, Gary?
So the best way to get a hold of me and find out about my books or ask for information that I might have talked about on a document is through my website. That's the Genesis6conspiracy.com, Genesis 6, the number 6conspiracy.com. On that website, I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book 1 and all 84 chapters of book 2. And there's also a contact the author. That's the Genesis6conspiracy@gmail.com with the number 6 again. And so if you ask for a document on some of the things I might have been talking about, like an Oiketarian today, then be patient. It might take me 3 to 4 weeks. I will get back to you. I'll send you that document, or I'll answer the question that you have, and I will get back to you. Also, if you want to purchase a signed copy, you can go to the Buy Now page, either book 1 or book 2, and get a signed copy from me. If you live in the US, there's a US page. If you live in Canada, there's a Canada page. And if you live in anywhere else in the world, there's an international page, and you have that on both book 1 and book 2. And if you wanted to buy from barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, amazon.ca, I have links over there from that buy page to go right to where it's listed on those online stores. And also there's a link for the Kindle edition over at Amazon for both books. Well, there will be one for book 2 as soon as I get that link up, but for book 1 and soon to be for book 2. And there's a Kindle edition available through Amazon that you can click directly through as well.
Yeah, I got the pre-order on that one. I'm waiting.
Yeah, we're hoping soon.
Soon? They didn't give you a date yet, did they?
No, all I know is it's being printed and assembled.
Okay.
So, and I know they've got at least another printing going because the pre-sales would have taken up all of the first run for sure. So.
Has people been recognizing you on the streets?
No, I stay rather incognito. Yes, I wear my Harpo Marx glasses and nose and mustache out there.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate your time again. And I hope to have you on again when your book comes out.
Yep, absolutely.
And we can go deeper into that because you just gave us a little touch today.
Yeah, we did. It's that book 2 is as unique as book 1 is. Book 2 is just as unique, but in a completely different way. And so there's no book out there like it. And again, if people like some of the work that Dr. Heiser did, and they like the work that I did in book 2, it's kind of a combination of that. So it's like Heiser on steroids. And then book 1, this is the Bible on steroids in terms of prehistory. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Well, thank you again.
Well, thank you.
And that brings us to an end of another episode of the Sensible Hippie Podcast. And I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to my guest, Gary Wayne, for joining us and sharing his profound insights. Gary, it's always a pleasure to dive into these fascinating topics with you. And to my listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this journey. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave me a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow me for more enlightening conversations. Until the next time, stay curious and remember, in a world full of ancient mysteries and modern myths, the truth is often stranger than fiction. So take care and keep your eyes open for those hidden wonders. Bye.
Some days I can't decide if I should realize that I can't escape it, this undying fate, the moment of conscience that's here today. So hold fast if you still believe everything will come around if you could wait for me. If I surrender to the wind, baby, I will find a place to finally begin. Somehow I made it through. I won't give up on you. So if you could see me, I won't let you down. 'Cause under the water we can hear the sound. So hold fast if you still believe everything will come around if you could wait for me. If I surrender to the wind, baby, Whoa, whoa,